Hi, Sharon. How
How
are
are
you?
you?
It's great to see you. It's great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yes, it's my pleasure.
And, I have known you for quite a long time, I think. We've been friends for a while. You helped us update the vegetarian and vegan diet pyramid. I have no idea. When did you become a vegan and why did you decide that eating the vegan way was best for you?
I know we have known each other a long time, Sarah. I can't remember the exact date, but it all goes back to all the wonderful work you do at Oldways. I still remember the first conference. I think it was the whole grain conference I went to that was just so amazing all those years ago. So it's been one of my great joys to work with Oldways and help you and all the great work you're doing.
You have done so much for us, with the vegetarian and vegan pyramid and plant forward plates. For those of you who are joining us and don't know, Sharon Palmer is the plant powered dietitian. When you first started using that title, I think a lot of people didn't really know what it means, and now it is so much a part of what we talk about today.
Yes, and you've always talked about plant-based eating, as part of the Mediterranean diet and, way before people started thinking, and also celebrating all the traditional diets, which is so important. I know you're passionate about that in your work. So, and now we really are understanding the importance of all of that.
Yeah.
But I've been eating a plant-based diet. I always say I've been eating some kind of a plant-based diet my whole life. And, I was raised in a almost entirely vegetarian home. I mean, my parents tried really hard to be vegetarian, and sometimes they wouldn't hit the mark, but I was always raised in that environment. And then I studied at Loma Linda University, which is plant-based. And then, I ate a pescatarian diet for a while and a lacto-ovo diet for a while. But then about almost 10 years ago, I decided to do a challenge on eating an entirely plant-based diet, and I just really loved it. So it's been almost 10 years now.
10, you're really at the beginning of that. And
yeah.
what is it? What is the California plant-based diet? What makes it different than other plant-based diets?
Yes, well, I have my new book, California Vegan, here. And,
I have it too.
I was actually, oh, there it is too. We both have it. I was really inspired. I was studying sustainability. I recently got my master's in sustainable food systems. And in my work, I had to start looking at bioregional food traditions. And it really struck me that California is kind of like the epicenter of plant-based eating in the US, because we have so many things going on. We have a history of plant-based eating, that goes back to things like the health experts to Loma Linda, where now we know of it as a blue zone.
Right.
And then we grow so much food here. We have the hippie movement, which was part of plant-based eating, back in Berkeley, and people were living on farms and producing their own food. That was a big part of it. Then we have all of the innovation. A lot of the plant-based food companies are in California that are making all these cool products. Mm-hmm. So there is a lot going on here. And it really struck me that would be the basis of a cool book. Although I do feel like you can eat plant-based no matter where you live. It just hopefully can be a new way of making your diet interesting, more healthy, more delicious.
I love in the book that you take people through sort of a cultural tour around the world. And it really seems to fit so well with California.
Yeah, there's so many different things, whether it's geography, California has so many microclimates. So if you're in the coastal region, you can grow these more delicate foods. And we even have seaweed that we have farmers harvesting seaweed along the coast. And then in the Central Valley is its rich growing area that grows so much of the country's food. And then we have like the wine regions. We grow olive oil, olives and olive oil. So we have the cultural traditions that are based on the climates and the growing regions. And then we have all of these diverse food cultures here too. So much diversity. And that has brought, an interesting part of our food culture to our plant-based food culture. There's so many beautiful plant-based traditions in different food cultures. So that's another big part of it.
Could you describe a few of them? I know
yes.
that.
Well, I think one of the most well-known is that there's a real deep connection to Mexican foodways because we have, a common border, and there's a history in California of, the Mission era. There was the Rancho era in California where there was, Mexican kind of the ranchos and the hacienda style of agriculture, and that was part of our history. So we've always had a rich kind of appreciation and kind of brotherhood with the Mexican food traditions, and that's a real kind of love affair in California. We have such amazing plant-based traditions that are part of those Latin foodways. So that's one thing. And then also we have so many different Asian countries that are represented here with beautiful foodways. We have so many farming traditions that come from countries in Asia. So a lot of farmers in California that came during the gold rush, even that they were growing so many beautiful foods here. So lots of different, foodways from countries in Asia. So we just have an amazing diversity of food cultures, and there's so many great plant-based dishes in all these different foodways.
Right, they really started out as plant-based as diets, and eating meat was really a celebratory thing for holidays.
Yeah, I think so.
So I live in New Hampshire, and when I see you on Instagram at the farmers market in Ojai on Saturdays, it makes me very jealous. So how would you advise people living in New Hampshire and northern climates where everything that we get is not at the farmers market in the winter? How can they really embrace California vegan?
That's a great question. And I really, I hear from people all the time. It's like, I love your photos from the farmer's market, but we have snow on the ground, so I can't have any local seasonal food right now. But I always like to remind people to follow the seasons where they're living and look at what's produced locally. I know in the wintertime, we can rely more on preserved foods, root vegetables. Like I have my butternut squash over in the corner that I still have that I had a couple months ago. So some of those, this is how humans survived over the lean times, the cold.
The old ways.
Yes. The preserved produce, the storage vegetables, the cruciferous, the cabbages, and things that were durable. And then once the seasons switch over to like spring, we're in full on spring in California right now. So now we have I have some of my seasonal produce. We've got the peas now that are coming out. Of course, carrots, are great this time of year. The strawberries are coming out. And so you can have those in your bioregions. It's just a different zone because, people always planted, their kitchen crops. My father grew up on a farm in Minnesota, and they had all of their own produce in Minnesota. In the summer, when the days are long, they would grow, can preserve things to last the winter. So I think, it's understanding that we can get back to those traditions and enjoy the seasonal produce and really just make the most of it when it comes in season. So I think, trying to, of course, not everybody has access to farmers markets, but if you try to follow those seasons, even when you're shopping in the supermarket, it's great.
Do you do canning and preserving of foods in your fall?
Yeah, that's my mom always canned, and I would help her, but I have not started the canning tradition. It's something I want to do because now I'm planting more food. I do purchase canned items. I sun dry my tomatoes in the summer, and I freeze things. But I would love to really learn more about the canning tradition. I think it's a great way to enjoy all those beautiful, foods when they're seasonal and local at that time.
And as you point out, it's a way for us in northern climates to be able to enjoy it all year long.
Yeah, definitely.
I love in your book that you have so many ingredients that are really familiar to everyone. But people who are just starting to prepare vegan or some part-time or all-time vegan, to have some sort of replacements like eggs. You talk about the aquafaba. How do you store that kind of thing? Do you make it just when you need it? Because there were a lot of things that aren't as familiar to people who aren't full-time vegan cooks.
Yeah, that's a great question. And I do try to make an effort that plant-based eating should be accessible, that they shouldn't be ingredients that you couldn't find in your typical supermarket wherever you live, and it shouldn't be overly complicated. So I hope to try to inspire people and not make it really overly complicated, you know. So when it comes to, like, for example, egg replacements that you just mentioned, there are a few, like, I use chia seeds and flax seeds in a lot of my recipes, but I do a lot of aquafaba. And for those that aren't familiar, I do have a blog about how to make aquafaba, like step by step, but it's very simple, and it's really the liquid from canned beans. Now these are dried beans, but when you have canned beans, have you ever noticed that thick gooey liquid in the can? Well, come to find out, food scientists discovered that that liquid, when they whipped it up, it was like a meringue. So it may sound like uber complicated, like, you know, like, oh, I don't want to try this, but it's literally, you drain the liquid from a can of beans and you whip it up and it becomes like an egg replacement. So like the liquid from one can of beans generally can take the place of 2 eggs. So when I put it in my recipes, I already tell people what to do. They don't have to worry about calculating, but literally you could take a recipe that has, you know, 2 eggs. Like if you have a cookie recipe that has 2 eggs, you could literally drain a can of beans and use that liquid, whip it up, and just put it instead of the eggs. So that's one thing that's kind of fun. And it's, you know, reducing food waste. You can use it in raw, like a lot of people don't want to use raw eggs because of potential, you know, foodborne illness. So if you have a recipe for raw eggs, you could use the bean liquid instead. So it's just kind of a fun way to, you know, eat a more plant-based diet, use the whole product, reduce food waste. So, and it's super easy.
I thought it was a great idea. Imagine hollandaise for a pregnant person. They can use that instead.
Even if you're allergic to eggs, you know, eggs is a fairly common food allergy. Place it too.
This question is from my daughter-in-law, Kayla, who is just beginning her studies to be a dietitian. Did you hear all of that? I saw it was a little frozen.
I saw frozen, but I could hear you just fine.
Right. And anyway, this is from my daughter-in-law, Kayla, who's just beginning to study to be a dietitian and has 2 little kids. And she said, what advice would you give parents introducing plant-based eating to kids, to fussy kids?
Yeah, I love that question. I have 2 children that are all grown up in college, you know, finishing up college now. So I remember what fussy kids were like. And one of the things I like to remind parents is that children do really well with exposure to healthy foods. So, you know, the big thing is vegetables. A lot of times that's the stumbling block for kids. They don't want to try vegetables. But research shows that if you just consistently expose kids, and what that means is just literally putting it on the dining table and not forcing them, but showing, you know, having broccoli or, you know, peas or carrots or whatever it is, just having it and then seeing mom and dad love it and eat it and with a smile on their face. And you know, it just shows that if it's part of the diet, that kids are going to get more accustomed to it and more likely to try it. And that's what I did with my children. I always had lots of these healthy plant-based foods on the table. Sometimes they tried it, sometimes they wanted a little bit on their plate, and maybe they took a bite here and there, but eventually now they are just huge. They love plant-based foods, you know, so they eat every vegetable under the rainbow. So I'm happy about that.
I would be too. I would be too. In your book, what one or two recipes would you really suggest for Kayla to serve to her kids?
Oh, that's a good question. I have so many great, how old are her kids?
They're 5 and 2.
Wow. You know, I have a buffalo cauliflower recipe that's like this idea of instead of chicken wings, you do cauliflower and you dip it in a ranch dressing. My kids loved that. So it was, you know, one thing I find is that kids love things that are, they can be part of the process. They like to dip things. They like to, you know, like fix their own plates. So anything that you can use a dip with, I find is great. I also have some really great hummus recipes in here. I think that's a great thing to get plant-based. And then they can be eating veggies or whole grain pita or something with the hummus. So those dips are really good. I also have some oatmeal recipes that are quite good, like for porridge bowls, things like that. And even smoothies. My kids used to love, I have some smoothie recipes in here. So that's another way. You know, I don't object to sneaking in veggies. You know, I think you have to do both. You can sneak in veggies and smoothies and muffins, but also, you know, have them, you know, available so they actually see the vegetables. They're not just all hidden away. So we can do both of those things.
That makes a lot of sense. You have some grain bowls in your book. What are some of your most favorite grains? I know that you use sorghum a lot.
Yeah, I love sorghum. I have some of my grains here. Here's some barley. I have a barley recipe, and I have some steel cut oats here. You know, what I try to do is I try to keep all of my whole grains on hand. So, you know, on Oldways website, they have that list of all the whole grains, and I pretty much have all of those in my kitchen because they have a long shelf life, you know, and I keep them in jars so they have a long, you know, they last a long time. So then when I feel like a different grain, I have it at my fingertips. I don't have to go run to the store. So I try to keep a variety of grains, and you can use those for your bowls, whether it's farro or wheat berries, sometimes rye berries, quinoa, brown rice, wild rice, buckwheat, bulgur. You just can, they all are great foundations because, you know, I love brown rice. I use brown rice a lot, but it's nice to have a variety,
Right.
you know. So, you know, trying the different grains. Now, this is one of my favorite bowls, which is on the cover, and this is a bulgur bowl. It's a very Mediterranean profile, and these are all things that grow in actually in my garden. I have pomegranates and oranges, and then in the summer I grow cucumbers, and those are my herbs. And this is a bulgur, well, I'm sorry, this is farro, but it could be, you know, you could replace that with any cooked grain, you know, but it's that Mediterranean profile with pomegranates and, you know, it's got an almond yogurt kind of a dressing. So that's one of my favorite bowls, but people love the bowls, and I love them too because it makes meal planning easy. It's like you've got your whole grain, you've got your plant protein, it could be beans, it could be tofu, I've got my tofu here. It could be, you know, tempeh, and then lots of veggies, whatever you have on hand, and then a sauce. So it's really easy to plan your meals, and they're all balanced.
I know, and you have great sauces and vinaigrettes in the book as well.
Yeah. I think it's so easy to make them yourself. You know, you don't, you can just whip them up so easily.
So easily.
Yeah.
So I read today that sales of plant-based foods have increased by 27% in this past year of all of us being at home. And the industry is now $7 billion. Wow. What do you think of, who would have thought, you know, 10 years ago that there would be all these different foods? What are your thoughts about these plant-based foods that are mimicking meat, seafood, cheese?
Yeah, you're right. It's just shocking that it's just so popular, and it's very exciting that people are interested in plant-based. I see young people are really interested in it. They may not want to be completely vegetarian or vegan, but they want to eat more plant-based. There is one study that showed 94% of people want to eat more plant-based, which is huge.
Huge.
You know? So I love that trend because it can make a big impact on health and the planet. And that's why people are more interested in this. A lot of times people think plant-based equals the new cool meat alternatives, which I think they're fine. I have some, I always keep some on hand, but I'd rather see people use like beans and whole grains and veggies. You know, that's where the benefit comes from a plant-based diet. However, if that helps you like start eating more plant-based and that's kind of your entryway, I'm fine with that. I just want to encourage people to move beyond those products to starting to, you know, have some simple plant-based meals, you know, based on the pulses, tofu, whole grains, seasonal vegetables, you know, the healthy fats, trying to move more that way.
Which leads us to talk about the EatLancet Report
Yes.
that came out last year with the goals for 2050 to reduce meat consumption in half.
Mm-hmm.
Think that this goal is possible?
I certainly hope so. You know, people are interested in doing it, but we're not 100% seeing like the results showing our meat consumption dropping like it should. You know, people are interested in eating plant-based, but we need to see the actual consumption of meat go down more. But I love EatLancet Report. I know that you work with a lot of the people that were involved in that report. You know, you know them with Oldways, and I just think it's a brilliant landmark report. And it's just, if you have a chance to look at it, I have a whole blog I wrote on it at SharonPalmer.com. I'm sure there's some beautiful resources. Oldways probably does, yeah. There's some beautiful resources, but it's quite simple that in order for us to preserve the planet, you know, we need to change the way we eat, the way we are growing our food. And one of the big things we could do is to reduce our meat consumption by 50%, but also things like added sugars, you know, all the junk foods. And there are numerous other things that we can do, you know, to help reduce our environmental footprint. But eating more plant-based, especially things like whole grains and pulses, that is really one of the key things that we can do.
Right. Beans and pulses are one thing that Americans don't eat enough of. And,
exactly.
And it's, you know, also, as you mentioned before, reducing food waste and not having so much food go into the landfill.
Yeah, food waste is huge. I always say that's low-hanging fruit. So if we're wasting 40% of our food that's perfectly edible food, you know, just think all of the resources that go into producing that food. Right. And, you know, that could really be an environmental benefit if we didn't waste so much of our food.
I think so maybe a personal question. Cheese for me is one of the things that I really love. What do you think of plant-based cheeses, or do they mimic the really rich taste of traditional cheeses?
Yeah, you know, it's a great question, and I know that there is a wonderful culture and tradition around cheese making that's part of traditional diets, and I think that's important to note. And the plant-based cheeses that I really love are those that we have some artisans making cheese based on these European style food traditions. Like they'll create nut milks and age them. Those are my favorites. A lot of the plant-based cheeses out there are really, if you look at the ingredient list, they're not based on whole foods. It's just a product to make it palatable, you know, and a replacement, you know. And sure, you know, that's fine every once in a while, but I'm really enjoying a lot of these plant-based cheeses that are made from nuts. I make some really easy ones. I don't make sophisticated ones, but with cashews. So it's based on more of a whole ingredient. There's one in Ventura where I live in this area. There's a local plant-based cheese maker that just does an amazing cheese right now. I find it over here. I'm not sure if you can find it. There are others. I like what Miyoko's doing. Miyoko Creamery in San Francisco. You can find her cheeses more available too. So we are getting better products for sure.
That's great. Have you been inspired by traveling? Have some of your recipes come from your travels? I read there was some information about Crete, and I know you've been there.
Yes, I've
Talk
been
about your
traveling
travel.
with Oldways too. A lot of the things I've learned about the Mediterranean diet came from Oldways, and that's the other thing that's cool about California is we have Mediterranean climate, so we can. That's one of the kind of hallmarks about California cuisine is it has that Mediterranean sort of feel. We use olive oil instead of heavier fats. We use a lot of citrus. We use a lot of herbs. A lot of seasonal produce, more light, not heavy on saturated fat. It's more of that light. But we like healthy fat, so it's kind of like that Mediterranean sort of a feel, you know, avocados and nuts and olives, and so. But I do think that traveling and studying foodways has really inspired me to learn about things. You know, like we're going to Thailand in next year, and I learned a lot about traditional foods there and ingredients and the way they use spices and. So you can learn so much and bring it home to make your own diet interesting and healthy and fun.
And I hope all of you listening, watching, will consider joining Sharon Palmer and Oldways in Thailand next February 20th through 27th. We'll be in Bangkok and Chiang Mai, to places that both Sharon and Oldways have visited and love, and we'd love to share them with you.
Yes,
So
that is going to be fun.
oldwayspt.org is where you'll find out more. And I guess I'd love to close. You know, I found your book to be very much in line with the inspiration the Oldways hopes to give, you know, things like vegetables for breakfast and be open to global food and think about sustainability. But if you had one big piece of advice to give to people thinking about eating more plant-based foods, what would it be?
You know, I think that's just such an important thing, you know, that we think about our food ways and everything. And I really think when it comes to plant-based, you know, I really think that people can take this kind of a slower approach that, you know, if you don't want to be vegan overnight or vegetarian, just starting to eat more plant-based and really enjoying the whole plant foods, not overcomplicating it, just really getting to understand the pure, simple, beautiful flavors of foods. You know, you don't need to use a lot of salt. It's just really, you know, treasuring whether it's that local carrot that just came in season right now, or growing some of your own food a little bit, using a lighter touch, you know, the olive oil and herbs and seasonings, but don't get over complicated. You don't have to feel, you know, scared that you have to learn all these new cooking techniques. Just really get to something simple. Find some key recipes that are easy for you to make and don't put a lot of stress on yourself. Start out, you know, maybe doing 1 day a week plant-based and then adding another day, and just make some slow, easy steps and feel good about it. Don't put too much pressure on yourself.
And enjoy it all. One thing I love that you talked about thinking about cooking as a meditation rather than as a chore. And
yes.
It just, no matter how your day is gone.
Yes, that's something that, you know, I think you and I both feel passionate about, that, you know, so many people are stressed out about cooking now, and they just think, oh my gosh, what am I going to cook? But a lot of my recipes I can get on the table in the time you could order takeout and go pick it up. You could have it all. And it could be something, you know, learning how to cook out of your own kitchen, but also like taking that time for your family, for yourself. By cooking a healthy meal, you're you know, nourishing your body, your health, your longevity, and, you know, just when you're sautéing the onions, take that time to enjoy the aroma. You know, just kind of decompress at the end of the day, and it's just kind of an investment in yourself. Don't think of it as just another thing you have to do. Enjoy that a little bit. Right. You know, in many cultures, cooking is an honored, respected opportunity. It's considered, you know, an amazing thing that you have healthy ingredients to feed yourself and your family. And, you know, it's almost a reverent thing to cook because you have these ingredients. You're so fortunate. And, you know, that it's just like a time-honored thing that you have the ability to do this. But we kind of like, you know, we've lost that connection to our foodways, and sometimes we don't stop to think about that.
I think that's so true. And it's also an investment in our planet and for our kids' futures and all around the health of our families, our individuals, and the planet.
That's so true. I mean, when we make these changes and we start eating more beans and whole grains instead of animal foods, we're reducing our impact on the planet. And, you know, the research is showing that your diet could be the single most impactful thing you do over your lifetime, even more than your car. So, you know, just because you eat, you know, 3 times a day on average, and all of those food choices make a huge impact on your own health as well as the health of the planet.
On that note, I'll say thank you. Goodbye from the East Coast to the West Coast. Thank you so much, Sharon.
Thank you. It's so fun talking to you, Sarah. It's always fun.
As always. Bye-bye.
Bye.